Hi, I'm the Moonlit Page Turner. Grab your treat, grab your tea, and let's talk books. For this month, we are traveling to Brazil. Brazil is in South America, and it is the fifth largest and fifth most populous country in the world. So scale-wise, especially if you're from the United States, Brazil, the country, is larger than the continental or contiguous, which is the 48 lower states, altogether. So Alaska's really big. So if you put Alaska and Hawaii, it's a really close call, but we're just a little bit bigger than Brazil. But that gives you a scale on how large this country is, and it is incredibly diverse. Not only from the ecology there, but the people that live there, as well as its history. Brazil gained its independence from Portugal, hence why the official language of Brazil is Portuguese, or Portuguese, in 1822, which was the War for Independence, and then they become a country a couple of years later. There's a lot of things that come from Brazil. One of the things that people most know is probably Paulo Coelho. He is the one that wrote The Alchemist, which I read several years ago. He's got a bunch of other books as well. There are other famous Brazilian authors, but I have two reads for us today. Another thing that just came out of Brazil is the movie I'm Still Here, which was nominated for many, many Academy Awards. It is based on the true story and the book of Marcelo Rubens Paiva. That book was not translated in English. I did look for it. I could only find it in Portuguese, and I don't speak or read Portuguese. So I chose the two books that are behind me. I have a nonfiction read, which is What Are the Blind Men Dreaming? And that's Noemi Jaffe. There are other authors in there, and I'll talk about that when I get to the book, as well as Symphony in White is our fiction book, and this is by Adriana Lisboa. Before we get into this month's reads, let's get into our treats. Now, these are actually mentioned in Symphony in White, and there is a recipe in there, although the recipe called for 6 full eggs. Not in this economy in the United States. So I definitely found another one that only used one. I was interested, maybe one day I'll go back to try to replicate the recipe in Symphony in White. But these turned out actually pretty good. These are casadinhos, I think is how you pronounce it. I looked a couple different places, and so the way that it's spelled is pronounced a little different than the way that it's pronounced. It also has to do with like wedding and couples, and so I have 2 different fillings. I have one that has a guava filling, because I love guava, as you saw my deaf recipe before, and then I have the traditional, or more traditional, which is the dulce de leche, which if you, there's a couple ways to make dulce de leche. You can sometimes find it if you go into the certain sections in grocery stores that's in a can. Otherwise, you're buying condensed milk, and you're either boiling it in a pot or you're baking it in the oven. If you have a pressure cooker, you could do it that way as well. I did it in the oven this time, but in previous recipes, I did it on the stove. It takes the same amount of time, so whether you want a pot boiling on your stove or something baking in your oven, they came out pretty much the same. But this uses cornstarch, so it's kind of like a sugar cookie, but not as sweet because the filling is definitely the sweeter part of it. And it is a little messy. It will crumble on you, but it's not super sweet. You kind of get the lasting taste of the filling, which that leaves a little bit of sweetness. So the cookie itself, not super sweet, but the filling is just the right touch. I'm going to start today by talking about What Are the Blind Men Dreaming by Noemi Jaffe. You'll notice that on both of my books, there are the library barcodes. I actually found both of these books on thrift reads, and they both came from different, so this one came from the Denver Public Library, and this one came from Palo Alto. And so they were getting rid of their library books, which is unfortunate because I really liked both of these books. This is nonfiction. You'll notice that it says Noemi Jaffe, and she is a well-known Brazilian author. This book is actually written by 3 people. We start the story with Lily Stern, and Lily Stern is Naomi's mother. And Lily started her life out in Yugoslavia, which we saw a little bit in our Bosnia and Herzegovina. And Tito makes another appearance, which he was in both of those books, and he is mentioned in this one as well. But in the 1940s, we have World War II, and Lily is actually taken to the Auschwitz concentration camp, where she gets separated from her family, and she survives the concentration camp. Once the concentration camps are closed, she is taken to several cities, actually, to be able to recover. She hurts her knee really bad in the camp. There's a whole story about that. So she does have to be in the hospital for a little bit to recover, as well as being malnourished, and as well as all the other things that happen in concentration camps. And so she's recovering. And Naomi tells us at the beginning in the introduction that her mother's stories weren't written in the camp. Because when Lily writes, she writes as if she is there, and she's writing the date, and this would happen this day. She'll even say, oh, I couldn't find my pen, so I'm making up for it, which to me led her to be a little bit of a unreliable narrator. I've read several first-person accounts of concentration camps. They're all very, very important, and they are all, though, very similar to the things that happen to them and the experiences that they have. So there wasn't anything really new. What I really enjoyed about Lily's story, though, is what happens after the camp. Because we see a lot of, like, they get rounded up, they are taken by a cattle car, and their life in the camp. But her concentration is largely on life after the camp. So we do see some stories of in the camp, but a lot of it is what happens afterwards, about the way that people treat her, as well as having to go back to Yugoslavia. And this is the part that really ground my gears. Naomi talks about it more in her part of the book, but we find out that Lily's brother, who is the only other surviving member of her family, steals her identity papers to give to his fiance so they can go to the United States. So Lily can't leave Yugoslavia because she doesn't have identity papers. What the heck? I was so mad for her. And you see this kind of subtly put in there that the reason why Lily gets married is because she has to have papers in order to leave. So for me, that was a really interesting juxtaposition that her daughter talks about this, because the man she marries is Naomi's father. They end up moving to Brazil, where they have Naomi. Naomi's part of the book, to me, was the best part of the book. She is a fantastic writer, and what she does is she'll take little pieces of what her mother wrote in the journal, and she'll kind of respond and think about it. The title of the book comes from a conversation that she has with her mother, where her mother didn't fully learn all the conjugations in Portuguese, because she speaks other languages as well. And so what she meant to say is, do blind men dream? Because they can't see. So what do they see when they're dreaming? But it comes out with, what are the blind men dreaming? And so it's little things like that that Naomi really reflects on. And she reflects on her mother's lives and the choices. And to me, it really reminded me of Mouse, if you've read that, which is about, again, it's a Holocaust survivor. His son is doing the comics, and about what life is like growing up with someone that goes through extreme trauma like that. So I liked Naomi's part better. I found that to be a little bit more introspective. The Lily's part is really kind of surface of, like, this happened and this happened. It's not a lot of reflection of, like, why is this happening? And then the third person that writes in this book is Lida Cartum. And Lida Cartum is Naomi's daughter, so it would be Lily's granddaughter. And they go to Auschwitz together. And so it's Lida's reflection on kind of a connection to see a little bit more of what her grandmother went through and kind of made her who she is today. So I unfortunately was a little bored at the beginning of it. I think the introduction that Naomi puts, where she talks about she purposely did not edit her mother's work. The only thing that she took out was stuff that didn't have to do with the experience in the concentration camp, like when she meets her father and things like that. The journal is actually in a Holocaust museum. And so She also writes about the fact that her mother is embarrassed by her writing because her daughter is a writer and she knows that her writing is not as great. So that was the reflective part of me, where Naomi's part is all reflection. And so that took it a little deeper, and actually I think I ended up giving this one 4 stars. The next book, sorry, it's got like a shiny library color cover, so I'm trying not to get it in the light there. It's called Symphony in White, and this is Adriana Lisboa. The cover is crazy looking. The title actually comes from a character in the book. His name is Tomas, and he is an artist. He sees one of the main characters. It's about 2 sisters. He sees her, and she reminds him of a painting, which is called Symphony in White. It's by Whistler. And you get a very, just like if you Google it, you can see, oh, that's what she looks like. See, it's like, it's spot on. So this is fiction. It is about 2 sisters growing up in more of a rural part of Brazil, and then they both leave their houses at different times to go to live with their great aunt in Rio de Janeiro. Our 2 sisters, we have Maria Inez, who Tomas says looks like the Symphony in White girl, and then we have Clarice. There is a moment that they share that changes both of their lives forever. I would say for Clarice it was more than a moment, but for Maria Inez it definitely is one specific incident that she keeps revisiting over and over again. We see the story from when they're like young teenagers. I think Clarice is like 10 and Maria Inez is like 9 or 8, and then we see it as they grow up to be in their 40s actually. So young adult life and an adult life. I really liked the way that this was written. I do have a grievance though, because this is not the only book that this happens, but I also had to look it up. Several Portuguese novels, so books in Portuguese, so this is Brazilian, and I read Blindness by Jose Saramago, I think his name is, and that he is from Portugal. They don't use quotation marks when people talk, and I kind of thought, well, maybe it was just an edition thing, but I looked it up and it says that they don't use it because they feel like it pulls the reader out from what they're reading. But then I get confused as I'm reading because I'm like, is this internal dialogue? Are they saying this out loud? What is happening? So that takes me out of it because I'm so used to reading. The quotation marks tells me that this is something that's out loud, and sometimes we use different things to show like internal dialogue. So this also is something that's given to you in pieces. The way that I described it in my review, and the way that I really think about this book, is it's almost like you're looking through a family photo album and you know that there's a story about what happened that day in that picture. And it's slowly, like, you may hear somebody talk about it and then someone else tells the story and then someone else tells the story based on a picture, and so you get more of it as you go along. That's what I felt like happened with this book. It goes back and forth in time. There is like a continuity, but you keep going back to certain parts. And so you have Maria Inez grows up and has a daughter. She ends up coming back home and there's issues going on with her husband. Clarice we see get married, but we know that she's no longer married. And Tomas is a character that comes into both of those girls' lives. There is a trigger warning with this one. This does have to do with sexual abuse and incest, and that is the main event that happens in the book that's kind of hinted at until it finally comes up. There is another character, though, that also dies. She's murdered, like, at the beginning of the book. She is also sexually abused, so that is kind of a trigger warning. It is hinted at, so you kind of, like, when it first came up, I was like, I know what this is going to be about. I feel like, and it's something that really makes me sad when I read these books because it's something that happens worldwide. I just read The Bluest Eyes by Toni Morrison earlier this year, and it, besides like the colonialism that I keep seeing in these books, that is another theme that happens over and over again. So it is something that every time I read it, I'm like, dang, you too. Like, why? We cannot seem to get past this. And this book does have sad parts to it. The Auschwitz concentration camp, awful as well, right? And that has its own sense of kind of trigger warnings, although I've read definitely worse accounts. This Lily's story in What Are the Blind Men Dreaming is a reflection, and so it's not as graphic as some of the other accounts that I read. But this one also not super graphic. It's more hinted at, but it's something that it rips these girls' lives apart, and it's something that echoes through their life for the rest of their lives, especially when you see what happens with Clarice and her husband, and then how she leaves her husband, and then what comes of her life towards the end of the book. So super sad, but beautifully written. I would recommend both books. I'm really glad that I actually chose both of them. I think I gave both of them 4 stars. Again, this one, it's not linear, and the freaking dialogue thing pulled me out of the story, so it makes me not enjoy it as I read it, but I have to like concentrate on trying to figure out what's going on. But I'm super glad that I read both of these. Hey, thanks for stopping by. Next month we are traveling to Brunei. If you are interested in what we're reading or what we've read in the past, please visit us on Goodreads and Instagram. See you then.